He was not supposed to save her. The orc woman crashed out of the dark forest like a wounded beast, armor broken, blood running down one arm, breath shaking as if every step hurt. Behind her, horns echoed through the mountains. Hunters, many of them, and they were not ordinary soldiers. She stumbled near the frozen river and fell to one knee. Any human with sense would run. Instead, a poor woodcutter carrying firewood on his back stopped in the snow and stared. He could see immediately she was not just any orc. Her armor was too fine, her presence too commanding, even half dead. Someone powerful had been brought down. She tried to stand, failed, and reached weakly for a blade. The human moved first. Before, the hunting horns grew closer. He dragged her toward his small hillside cabin, slammed the door shut, and barred it with shaking hands. Minutes later, the orc woke up. Her blade was suddenly at his throat. Outside, riders surrounded the hill. The blade at his throat did not shake. The orc woman had woken fast, despite the blood loss. Her eyes were sharp, dark and furious, and even sitting weakly on the edge of the narrow bed, she looked powerful enough to break the small cabin apart if she wanted. The human stood very still, hands raised slightly, breathing slow so she would see he was not a threat. "I dragged you here," he said quietly. "If I wanted you dead, I would have left you in the snow." For a moment, the room stayed silent except for the wind scratching against the wooden walls. The cabin was barely a home. The roof sagged in one corner where old storms had cracked the beams. One table leaned unevenly on 3 legs. A small iron pot hung above the fire where thin broth simmered. Bundles of dried herbs were tied to the rafters. Everything smelled of smoke, earth and winter. It was the life of a man who survived one careful day at a time. The orc woman slowly lowered the blade, though she did not sheath it. "You are foolish," she said, her voice rough with pain. "Probably," he answered. That seemed to confuse her. He moved carefully to the hearth and lifted the pot. "You're poisoned," he added, "or something close to it. Your wound was turning black." Her eyes flickered for a second, a reaction she could not fully hide. He poured the broth into a rough wooden bowl and placed it on the table between them, then stepped back again to give her space. Every movement he made showed patience, the quiet habits of someone used to calming frightened animals or injured travelers. Outside the cabin, distant riders shouted to one another. The orcs. They shifted toward the door immediately. "They are searching the ridge," the human said. "But they already passed this hill once." "How do you know?" "I watched them from the window before you woke." She studied him carefully now. Most humans she had met either trembled in fear or tried to bargain when facing someone stronger. This one did neither. His clothes were patched, his boots had been repaired so many times they barely resembled their original shape. His hands were rough with work, but steady. A poor man, a quiet man, yet he had dragged an armored orc warrior through the snow and treated her wounds. Without asking a single question, that alone made him strange. She reached slowly for the bowl and drank. The broth was simple, little more than water and vegetables, but she swallowed it without complaint. The warmth seemed to push a little life back into her body. As she shifted on the bed, a piece of broken armor slid aside. The human had noticed it earlier when cleaning her wounds. The metal was not common soldier gear. The design etched along the edges was delicate and ancient. Even the damaged bracer carried markings that suggested rank, important rank. He had said nothing about it. "You have not asked my name," she said after a moment. "You have not offered it," he replied. Another silence settled between them, heavier this time. The wind outside carried distant horns again. Closer now. The orc slowly stood from the bed despite the pain and walked toward the narrow window. Even wounded, she moved like someone trained for command and battle. She looked out at the dark forest below the hill. Torchlights flickered between the trees. Her jaw tightened. "These men are not bandits," she murmured. The human followed her. Gaze and felt a quiet chill crawl through his chest, because he had just realized the same thing, and if soldiers were searching for her in the middle of the night, then the woman inside his small, broken cabin was far more dangerous and far more valuable than he had first believed. The torchlights faded after a while, but neither of them relaxed. The human pushed a heavy crate against the door and checked the window again before returning to the fire. The cabin was quiet, except for the low crackling of burning wood and the wind moving along the hillside. The orc woman had not sat down again. She stood near the window, one hand resting against the wall for balance, watching the dark forest as if it might move at any second. Even wounded, she held herself with a kind of rigid control that did not belong to ordinary soldiers. "You should sit," the human said. "I have rested enough. You collapsed in the snow less than an hour ago." Her eyes shifted toward him. "Orcs do not fall apart from pain." He lifted an eyebrow slightly. "You did." For a moment she looked ready to snap back, but then she exhaled slowly and lowered herself onto the chair near the fire. The movement was stiff. The poison had not fully left her system. The human moved closer and crouched beside her. "Let me see the wound again." She watched him carefully, but did not resist this time. He untied the cloth binding around her arm and peeled it away. The skin around the cut was still dark at the edges, though not as badly as before. He dipped a strip of clean cloth into a bowl of warm water mixed with crushed herbs. "This will sting," he said. "I'm aware of how wounds work." He pressed the cloth gently against the cut. She did not react at first, but a few seconds later her jaw tightened and the muscles in her shoulder went rigid. "Your people always lie about that part?" she asked. "About what?" "That it will only sting." He allowed himself the smallest smile. "I said it would sting. I did not say how much." She watched him closely now, not with the same suspicion as before, but with curiosity. Most healers she had known were rough, efficient, focused on keeping warriors alive long enough to fight again. This human worked slowly, carefully cleaning every trace of dirt from the wound. "You're not a healer," she said. "No." "Then why do you know how to do this?" He tied the new bandage around her arm before answering. "Because nobody else was around when people in my village got hurt." She leaned back slightly in the chair, studying him again. The cabin revealed more about him the longer she looked. Tools neatly arranged on the shelves, bundles of dried plants hanging in careful rows, a repaired wooden stool with one leg carved. Differently from the others, nothing in the room was new. Everything had been fixed. "You live alone," she said. "Yes." "No clan." "No family." "No." That seemed to puzzle her. In orc society, even the weakest warrior belonged to a clan. Strength came from numbers, from loyalty, from blood ties. A person without clan was something close to exile. "How do you survive winters?" she asked. He shrugged slightly. "Same way everyone else does." "That is not an answer." He stood and added another piece of wood to the fire. "Some winters you eat well," he said. "Some winters you do not." She looked at him for a long moment. There was no bitterness in his voice, no anger, just quiet acceptance. Orcs did not think that way. Struggle was something to conquer or destroy, not endure. A faint sound outside made them both freeze. The human immediately moved to the door and listened. The wind carried faint footsteps through the snow somewhere beyond the trees. The orc woman reached slowly for the knife lying on the table. They stayed like that for nearly a minute. Then the sound faded. The human finally relaxed a little and returned to the fire. "You should eat more," he said, lifting the pot again. She frowned. "You already gave me food. You also lost a lot of blood." He poured another bowl and handed it to her. She accepted it this time without argument. They ate in silence. The broth was plain, but warmth filled the small cabin. Outside, the wind pushed against the walls while snow began to fall. For the first time since she had collapsed in the forest, the orc felt something strange settling in her chest. Safety. It was unfamiliar. She finished the broth and set the bowl down. "You have not asked why they hunt me?" she said suddenly. The human shook his head. "If you want to tell me, you will. And if I do not, then I still have a wounded guest in my house." She stared at him. "Orcs are not guests in human houses. You are in this one." Another silence followed, but this one was different, less sharp, less hostile. The fire crackled softly between them. After a moment, she spoke again. "What's your name, human?" He looked up from the firewood he was splitting. "Erin." She nodded slowly, committing the name to memory. Erin noticed something then. Her breathing had steadied. The tension in her shoulders had softened slightly. For the first time since she woke, she no longer looked like a warrior ready to strike at any movement. But something else had changed too. Outside, far beyond the falling snow, a single horn echoed through the mountains again. The sound was deeper this time, longer. The orc woman's face went completely still, and Erin suddenly realized that whoever was hunting her had not given up. They were gathering. The horn's echo faded into the mountains, but the silence it left behind felt heavier than the sound itself. Erin slowly set the axe down beside the hearth. He had been splitting thin pieces of wood to keep the fire steady through the night, but his attention was no longer on the task. The orc woman had gone very still. She was listening in a way that told him the horn meant something more than a simple search call. "You know that signal," he said quietly. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she stood from the chair and walked toward the narrow window again, her steps steadier than before, but still careful. Snow now covered most of the hillside, softening the world outside, but distant shadows still moved through the forest below. "Yes," she finally said. "What does it mean?" "It means they are not leaving." Erin felt a slow weight settle in his chest. He had hoped the riders might give up by morning. People rarely searched long for something they expected to already be dead. But this was different. The orc rested her hand against the wooden frame of the window, watching the dark trees. "That horn is used to mark territory during a hunt," she said. "It tells others the prey is still alive." Erin leaned against the table, folding his arms. "So you are the prey, for now." The calm way she said it sent a small chill through the room. Erin had lived near the border his entire life. He had heard stories about orcs, about their battles and clans and brutal traditions. But standing beside one now, seeing the tension in her shoulders as she watched the forest, made those stories feel far less simple. "You said earlier that they were not bandits," he said. "They are not. Soldiers?" Her jaw tightened, slightly. Something worse. That was all she offered. The fire crackled between them. Snow thickened outside, covering tracks, softening sound. For a brief moment the world felt suspended, as if the storm itself were trying to hide the cabin from everything beyond the hill. Erin stepped toward the shelf and began sorting through his herbs. "You should rest," he said. "I have rested enough. You are still weak. I have been weaker." He looked over his shoulder at her. "You are stubborn." A faint flicker crossed her face. "That is the first correct thing you have said about orcs." Despite himself, Erin almost laughed. It was the first moment of something close to humor between them. He crushed a handful of bitter leaves into a bowl and mixed them with hot water. The smell filled the small room immediately. "What is that?" she asked. "Something unpleasant?" "That does not answer the question. It helps clear poison." She took the bowl from him without hesitation and drank it. The bitterness hit immediately. Her expression tightened, but she finished it without complaint and set the bowl back down. Erin watched her carefully. "You hide pain well," he said. She leaned back slightly in the chair. "In my world, showing pain invites attack." In mine, he replied, hiding pain usually just means no one notices. The words slipped out before he could stop them. For a moment the room fell quiet again. The orc studied him differently now. "What happened to your family?" she asked. Eren shrugged faintly. "Winter, sickness, debt, the usual things." "You say that like it means nothing." "It means a lot," he said quietly, "but it does not change anything." Her gaze lingered on him. Orcs mourned loudly, fiercely. Loss was honored through battle songs and scars carved into armor. The idea of someone simply continuing, carrying grief quietly while fixing roofs and chopping wood, felt strangely unsettling to her. "You are alone," she said. "Yes." "You do not seem angry about it." Eren looked at the fire. "I was," he admitted, "for a while." "What changed?" He took a moment before answering. "Anger does not keep you warm in winter." The simplicity of the answer hit harder than a long speech. The orc leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows on her knees. "In my world," she said slowly, "being alone means you have been cast out." "Or defeated. Which one are you?" Eren asked. She did not answer right away. The firelight reflected faintly in her eyes. "Neither," she said at last, but the way she said it made Eren certain the truth was more complicated. A sudden knock shattered the quiet. Both of them froze instantly. It was not loud, just two sharp strikes against the door. Eren's heart jumped into his throat. Nobody visited this cabin, ever. The orc moved faster than he had seen her move all night. Despite the injury, she slipped into the darker corner of the cabin beside the bed, lifting the knife again. Her voice dropped low. "Do not open it." The knock came again, this time louder. "Eren!" A man's voice called through the wood. "You in there?" Eren recognized the voice immediately. Thomas, a farmer from the lower valley. Eren moved toward the door slowly, every step careful. "What do you want?" he called. The man outside shifted impatiently. Soldiers passed through the village looking for something. Eren felt the blood drain from his face. "They said a dangerous orc crossed the ridge tonight," Thomas continued. "We're checking every house." Behind him, the orc's grip tightened on the knife. Eren glanced toward her for just a fraction of a second. Her eyes locked onto his, silent, alert, waiting. Outside, Thomas knocked again. "Open the door, Eren." Eren's hand hovered over the door latch. Behind him, the small cabin felt suddenly too small to hold the truth pressing in from every direction. Snow scraped against the walls outside, while Thomas shifted impatiently on the porch. "Come on." "Eren?" the farmer called again. "We're checking every house. The soldiers said she's dangerous." Eren swallowed. Behind him, the orc woman stood in the shadows beside the bed, one hand gripping the knife, the other pressed against the wound in her arm. Her eyes were calm, but the calm was sharp, focused, like a hunter, waiting for the moment. Before the strike. If Thomas opened that door fully, he would see her immediately. Eren lifted the latch. The door creaked open a few inches. Cold air rushed into the room. Thomas stood outside wrapped in a thick cloak, snow clinging to his beard. Two other men from the village waited further down the hill, holding lanterns. "You look terrible," Thomas said, squinting past him into the dim cabin. "You been sick?" "Just tired," Eren replied. Thomas leaned forward slightly. "You heard the horns tonight?" Eren nodded. Hard not to. "The soldiers say an orc noble escaped an attack up in the mountains," Thomas continued. "They're offering silver to anyone who reports her." "Silver?" Eren's stomach tightened. "That's not my problem," he said carefully. Thomas tried to peer over his shoulder. "You mind if we check inside, just to be sure?" Behind him, the cabin stayed perfectly silent. Eren blocked the doorway. "With his body." "You think I'm hiding an orc in here?" he asked. Thomas hesitated. "Well, no," he admitted. "But they told us to check everyone." Eren exhaled slowly. "You can see the whole place from here. One room, no cellar, just me." Thomas looked past him again. The firelight flickered across the empty table and narrow bed. The shadows hid the corner where the orc stood. After a moment, Thomas stepped back. "All right," he said. "Just be careful. If she's nearby, the soldiers say she's worth more than a year's harvest. Aaron forced a faint nod. Thomas and the others began walking down the hill, their lantern lights slowly fading into the snow. Aaron shut the door. The latch dropped back into place with a heavy click. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then, the orc stepped out of the shadows. "You lied easily," she said. Aaron turned toward her. "I did not like it, but you still did it." "You were about to kill 3 farmers if they came inside," he replied. She didn't deny it. Instead, she walked slowly toward the fire and lowered herself into the chair again, breathing carefully through the lingering pain. For a moment, the only sound in the cabin was the fire. Then she spoke. "You deserve the truth." Aaron didn't answer. She looked at him directly. "My name is Caelra." The name meant nothing to him, but the way she said it carried weight. "I am the war heir of the Ironfang clan," she continued, "daughter of High Chieftain Varkan." Aaron felt the words hit him like a sudden blow. He knew that name. Everyone along the border did. The Ironfang clan ruled half the mountain territory beyond the human kingdoms. Their warriors were feared across every trade road and battlefield in the region, and their war heir, their future ruler, was sitting in his broken wooden chair. Aaron stared at her. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that the entire mountain war clans are searching for you?" "Yes. And the soldiers offering silver are not just hunting some fugitive. No, they're hunting a queen." Caelra's expression remained steady. "Something like that." Aaron stepped back from her, as if the fire between them had suddenly grown hotter. All the small pieces he had ignored before now slammed together in his mind. The armor, the soldiers, the hunting horns, the way she carried herself, even when wounded. "You knew," he said quietly. "I suspected." "You suspected," his voice sharpened. "You suspected I should know the most powerful orc in the mountains was bleeding in my bed." Her eyes flashed slightly. "I was trying to survive. And I was trying to help someone who looked like they needed it." The words came out louder than he intended. The cabin seemed to shrink around them. "You let me treat you like a lost traveler," he continued, "like someone who had nowhere to go." Caelra's voice hardened. "For a few hours, I did not." That answer stopped him, but the distance between them had already opened. Aaron ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the small room. "You should leave," he said finally. Caelra's gaze sharpened. "You are sending me away." "You don't belong here," he said. "Neither do the soldiers hunting me. That's not the point." "Then what is?" Aaron looked at her, frustration and something deeper crossing his face. "The point is, your world is not mine," he said quietly. "And when people like you fall into places like this, people like me get crushed underneath it." Caelra opened her mouth to respond, but a deep horn blast cut through the night. Much closer this time, both of them turned toward the window. Dozens of torchlights were now climbing the lower ridge. Not villagers, not farmers, warriors, and they were heading straight for the cabin. The first torch reached the lower slope of the hill. Aaron saw the shapes moving through the trees, tall, figures in heavy armor, far larger than human soldiers. Their banners snapped in the winter wind, iron symbols catching the firelight. Orcs, a lot of them. The war horn sounded again, deeper this time, vibrating through the frozen ground like thunder. Caelra stepped beside the window, her face hard, as stone. "They found me faster than I expected." Aaron turned toward her sharply. "Found you?" She didn't look away from the approaching torches. "Not all of them came to kill me." That sentence settled in the room like a blade. "You mean some of them are yours?" "Yes." Aaron laughed once, bitter and short. "So that's it? Your army arrives, you go back to your throne, and this whole mess disappears." Caelra turned to face him. "If I walk out there alone, they will kill you." The certainty in her voice made him pause. "Why?" he asked. Because anyone who helped me becomes a weakness, she said calmly. My enemies will demand proof I was not hiding here willingly. Eren stared at her. The meaning settled slowly. They would kill me to make a point. Yes. The wind rattled the cabin door. Outside, the torchlight was climbing higher. Eren felt anger rise in his chest, but underneath it was something heavier, resignation. I knew helping you would end badly, he muttered. Kael'ra stepped closer. You saved my life. That doesn't stop politics. No. Silence stretched between them again, thick with everything unsaid. Then Kael'ra did something unexpected. She removed the heavy iron pendant hanging around her neck. The metal was dark, etched with the same ancient markings that had decorated her armor. Even Eren could see it was something important. She held it out toward him. This is the mark of the Iron Fang war heir. Eren didn't reach for it. What am I supposed to do with that? If you carry it, she said. No warrior of my clan can harm you. Eren shook his head immediately. You think a necklace fixes this? It is more than a necklace. It doesn't change what I am. Kael'ra's eyes narrowed. And what is that? Eren gestured around the cabin. A poor human who fixes roofs and boils soup. You are the man who carried an armored orc through a snowstorm, she replied. You stood between me and soldiers tonight. You treated my wounds without asking for coin or power. That doesn't make me part of your world. No, she said quietly. Then she took another step closer. But it makes you part of mine. Eren looked at her, searching for the trap in the words. What are you saying? The torches outside were almost halfway up the hill now. Their voices were beginning to carry through the wind. Kael'ra's voice remained steady. If you stay here, you die. I figured that part out. If you come with me? She paused. The words that followed were heavier than anything she had said all night. You will not come as a prisoner. Eren frowned. Then what? Kael'ra lifted her chin slightly. My chosen. The words hung in the air between them. Eren blinked. You can't be serious. In my clan, she continued, the war heir may claim a bond outside the clan if they choose. It grants protection, land and place within the Iron Fang household. You're talking about marriage? Yes. Eren stared at her like the world had suddenly lost its balance. You've known me for 2 days. You saved my life. That's not the same thing. No, she agreed. It is more. The horn sounded again outside. Closer. Eren ran both hands through his hair, pacing across the small cabin. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand perfectly. No, you don't, he said, turning back toward her. Your people will hate me. Some will. Humans will think I betrayed them. Perhaps. I don't belong with warriors and clan leaders, he continued. I barely belong in my own village. Kael'ra watched him carefully. You belong where you choose to stand. That's not how the world works. It is how mine does. Eren shook his head. You're offering me protection because you feel grateful. Her eyes flashed. I am offering you a future because I respect you. That silenced him. Outside, heavy footsteps were now crunching through the snow just beyond the trees. They had minutes at most. Kael'ra stepped forward again until she stood directly in front of him. I will not pretend this choice is simple, she said quietly. If you come with me, you will face warriors who believe humans are weak. You will stand inside a world built on strength and blood and clan loyalty. Eren met her gaze. And if I say no, her voice softened, then I walk out that door and tell them I was alone. And they kill you for weakness. Possibly. Eren stared at her. You'd risk that? Yes. Why? Kaelra's answer came without hesitation. Because you treated me like a person when everyone else sees a weapon. The cabin fell silent again. Eren looked around the room. The crooked table, the patched roof, the shelves of herbs. Everything he had built here. Everything small and fragile that had somehow kept him alive this long. Outside, the torches were reaching the top of the hill. Voices called out in the Orc tongue. Eren turned back to Kaelra. You really mean it, he said quietly. Yes, this isn't a favor. No. He took a slow breath. If I walk out that door with you, you will never live quietly again, she said. Eren looked at the door, then back at her. The wind pushed hard against the cabin walls as the first armored shadow appeared outside the window. He closed his eyes for a second. Then he picked up the iron pendant from her hand. When Eren opened the cabin door, the wind nearly tore it from his hands. Snow swirled across the hillside, and the clearing below the cabin was filled with armored figures. Tall orc warriors stood among the torchlight, their weapons heavy, their eyes sharp. Some wore the iron sigil of the Iron Fang clan. Others bore darker markings Eren did not recognize. The moment Kaelra stepped forward beside him, the entire gathering went still. Even wounded, she looked like something carved from iron and winter. Her shoulders straightened, her presence changing instantly from hunted fugitive to commanding heir. One of the armored warriors stepped forward, kneeling immediately in the snow. War heir, he said in the Orc tongue, but not every warrior followed him. Across the clearing, several figures remained standing. Their expressions were harder, colder, rivals, opportunists, warriors who had expected to find a corpse, not a living heir. And then they saw Eren standing beside her. The whispers started immediately. Human, weakling, spy. Eren felt every eye on him, measuring him, judging him. Kaelra raised her hand. The whispers stopped. Her voice carried across the snow like steel, striking stone. This man saved my life. Silence answered her. One of the rival warriors stepped forward, his armor darker than the others. A human sheltered you? He asked, disbelief heavy in his tone. Yes. And you trust him? Kaelra did not hesitate. I do. The warrior's gaze slid toward Eren, sharp with contempt. Humans sell loyalty for coin. Eren said nothing, but Kaelra stepped closer to him. Then she did something none of them expected. She placed her hand over the iron pendant now hanging around Eren's neck. This human is under my protection, she said. Her voice hardened further. And under my claim. The words rippled through the warriors like a sudden storm. Shock, anger, confusion. Even the loyal Iron Fang soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. But none of them challenged her, not openly. Because Kaelra was still the war heir, and her authority, even wounded and hunted, still carried weight. The rival warrior's jaw tightened. You would bind your future to a human, he said quietly. Kaelra met his gaze without flinching. I choose strength where I find it. The warrior studied Eren again. For a long moment, it looked as if he might challenge the claim. Then slowly he stepped back. The battle for power would come later. Tonight was not the moment. The tension in the clearing eased just enough for the warriors to begin moving again. Orders were given, guards were posted, horses were brought forward. Eren realized, standing there in the snow, that the quiet life he had known was gone forever. But strangely, he did not feel regret. Only the heavy weight of a path he had chosen. The journey into the mountains was long. Weeks passed before they reached the Iron Fang stronghold, a fortress carved directly into the black stone cliffs of the northern range. The halls were enormous, built for warriors larger than any human. Eyes followed Eren everywhere he walked, some curious, some hostile, some openly mocking. He did not try to impress them. He fixed broken tools. He helped the healers with herbs. He listened more than he spoke. Slowly, some of the suspicion faded. Not all of it, but enough. Kylra faced her own battles. Clan leaders questioned her choice. Rivals whispered that a war heir who bound herself to a human showed weakness. Yet none could deny the truth that had spread through every warrior hall. She had survived betrayal. She had returned stronger. And the human beside her had been the one who kept her alive. That truth was harder to dismiss than any rumor. Seasons changed. Snow melted from the mountains. Spring returned. One evening, Kylra stood beside Eren on a ridge overlooking the valley below the stronghold. The wind carried the scent of pine and distant rivers. Eren leaned against the wooden railing he had built there himself. "You know," he said quietly, "my old cabin was smaller than one of your storage rooms." Kylra glanced at him. "You rebuilt 3 towers in this fortress without complaint. That's because your towers had better tools." She almost smiled. For a moment they stood in silence, watching the last light of sunset stretch across the mountains. "You gave up your quiet life," she said eventually. Eren shrugged. "I didn't have much of one." "You had peace." "Sometimes," he admitted. "And now?" He looked out over the valley where orc warriors trained below, their voices echoing through the cliffs. Then he looked at her. "Now, I have something else." Kylra studied his face. "What?" Eren reached for her hand. "A family." The wind moved softly through the mountains as dusk settled around them. Below the ridge, the lights of the Iron Fang stronghold began to glow one by one. And far above it all, on the quiet edge of the cliff, a human man who had once owned nothing stood beside the woman who had once ruled alone. Neither of them belonged to the world they were born into anymore, but together they had built a new one,